So first and foremost, I'm going to just type something out so I know for sure I'm on the right page, and I'm on the right page. I'm going to put the HTML content. This title is going to be called loops. I have just my body, and that's essentially it. And then I have my style sheet. The style sheet, I always start with an outline, 1 pixel, dotted, whatever color you want. We'll pick green this time, if you can see it. Nope, that was a bad idea. Red. Oh, right. So it's not working for obvious reasons, but maybe it's not so obvious yet for you, but it will be soon. What is it? Why is it not working for me?
Because you don't have it.
Yep, exactly. I'm not actually, well, I'm not actually linking the file. I should still be able to see the HTML document, the HTML element and the body element, but it's I need to link it. If it's in the same exact folder, the href has to point to the exact file name, style.css. If my style.css was in a folder called style sheets, I would preface style sheets / style.css. Why? Because this file here that I'm calling on it is from the same file directory. So again, if that's not so clear, it's not a big deal. It'll come. You'll do a lot more of it. It'll make a lot more sense. But that's essentially why we use style.css. So let's double check. There it is. You guys can kind of see the outline. As I increase and decrease the size, it stays to the full width of my browser. If I increase and decrease the width of my browser, so does the document. So the first thing you would definitely want to do is I like to define a div with a class of container, and that is essentially the container of my project. I'll explain in a minute why. So here I'm going to start with div.container and set the width to 970 pixels. So if I go here and refresh the page, now if I zoom in and out, you can kind of see it on the top there that is only up to this point. Also, what I recommend is minimum height, because height, if I just say height, it's going to, at 100, it will set it to 100 no matter what. If I say minimum height, that means that no matter how much content you have in it, the smallest it can be is 100, right? And I do that just so I can see the thing there. That's why I do that, right? So min height, there it is. And also we can throw some background color. I think on the platform we recommend background colors for everything. It's a little distracting for me, so I don't do it. But if I get confused or lost, I do use it for the sections I need to kind of keep in mind that I'm working on. So I'll leave it as is. So I don't even have the loop assignment up, which is not a good idea. We should probably do that. Whoa. Is this it?
Yep.
My setup looks a little different, so just ignore it. But it does. After the optionals? Whoa. Where am I missing something here? What's going on? Oh, there it is. Cool. All right. So this is what we want to do. All right. We'll leave this as this right here. No, we're not. There we go. So I'll have it here for us to look at, right? So what do you guys see here as far as divisions, blocks? Think of it in Lego blocks, like just. Yeah. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We can make a big, long div on the top, and then one like slim div on the left, one larger div on the right, and then a bottom div on there, right? So we can essentially have 4 large sections. I kind of identify it more as in rows in my mind. So I'm going to create a header row, a body row, and a footer row, right? And I would use class. I won't use the built-in body, because built-in body here, what I mean by that is, let me back up here. Let's go back to our project, which is here. What I mean by that is this body tag here has to remain there, like cannot not be there, right? So we have to do all the content inside of this body tag. So here, there's a couple ways you can go about it. I can use the header HTML. I think this is HTML5, maybe. The header tag, that's again, so we don't want to use the body tag twice. And then there's also a footer tag. But as opposed to doing that, I think it's easier to identify it if we put a header with a div with a class of header that defines all the header content. A div with the class of body, because this div with the class of body is entirely different with a tag of body. A tag of body is a tag of body. A division with a class of body is a division with a class of body, right? So I'm going to put another one here, class footer. So I have those three sections right now, and here, just for the development's sake, I guess you could say, I'm going to call on all three of them individually, div.header, div.body, and div.footer. And that's why I put the commas, so I don't have to repeat my code. I can just do all the styling for all three of them in one place. And I'm going to say minimum height for all three of them is 50 pixels, and width is 100%. Why am I putting 100%? Because I want those sections to take the full width of their parent container. So they're maxed out in width, right? So there's the header on the top, there's the body, and there's the footer, right? Minimum heights, and that's great. If I put minimum height to 150, of course they will all expand, and then that division that was called div.container automatically expanded because it's minimum height as well, so it can always expand larger.
Wait, do you want 4 divs or 3?
I'm going to do 3 section divs of rows. And my body row that contains these 2 divs will have essentially 2 sections inside of it. Yeah, I'm going to be a little more like particular about. Yes.
With 100%, isn't that by default it's 100%, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know. Maybe it is. Oh yeah, it is. Awesome. So.
Are there browsers that's not?
I don't know. That's a good point. We can just leave it as with 100% just to be definite about it, definitive about it. But we can always look it up. I always do. You're the first one to point that out, so I've always have done that. Just peace of mind, I guess. Because those are the large sections, so I want to make sure that their widths and heights are set, so I don't have to worry about them in the future. So now, let's create this box and this box, right? Which means that I need to create a cylinder box here and a larger box here, right? Just to kind of create the sections. Section out. So that's in body. I'm going to create 2 divisions here. The first one is going to be a class of, what was it called? Navigation? Sure. Again, here I could just use a nav div, or I can create a div called with a class of nav, right? Either or, it's better to use the actual tags, but just for our sake, I just want to use classes, right? Nothing wrong with using classes, but I don't want any predefined styling for any of them. Yeah?
Do you recommend using classes over IDs for divs?
Yes. So usually, there's a particular reason why I use classic container, because when you use Bootstrap, you start with a classic container, so just kind of is similar to everything I do. Class of header, if I only have one header in the entire project, that would be an ID. But my reasoning is, say you want to repeat the styling, I could just reuse that. Right? That's really why I use a lot of classes here. But it's just organized in my mind, I guess you could say that way. So class body. So in class of body, which again is, whoops, this middle part here, I'm going to create a large div on the left side here that's kind of slimmer, and the one on the right, and kind of give them general heights. So I have a class of nav on the left and a class of content on the right, right? So we're going to call on the, how do we call on the nav div?
Div dot space. Yeah, don't you div dot space body now?
Yeah. In this case, we're saying I want any division that has a class of nav on it. I want to affect it in this way. I want to set the width to be, let's say, 30%.
You just say nav.
If I had an ID, yes. If I use an ID, yes. But I'm using a class, so I'm calling on the div.net. Anybody not clear on that? Because we can explain it further.
Yeah, could you just say .nav?
Yes, I could. But I'm being a little more specific when I call on a div.
Okay.
Now, only a div with a nav class will be affected by this HTML with the CSS.
I usually put a space between them, div space down there. Like if I was to do that, that okay.
this will only work because I have a body div prior to the nav div, because this is saying find every div in the body in the DOM, right? This over here, and find anything inside of it that has a .nav class. So by default, it will find this and affect this, but it's kind of traversing through all of it, right? So we want to show this and say I want the div that has a class of nav, as if it's unique. We could use IDs on these actually, but hopefully you guys will get comfortable with using classes in general by doing this pattern. Okay. So I am also going to give this a minimum height, so I can just just see it. Whoa. Okay. 250 pixels. Width 30%. And then I'm going to call in a div.content. Minimum height as well. 250. Actually, this is like 350 pixels. Should be more. And width should be. Now, if I put 70%, let's look at this. Actually, let's look at this a couple ways. So kind of pay attention to this more so than in other parts. This is what happens. Now, I am not going to give you the opportunity to guess what the right answer is. So how can we identify what the issue is here? What steps could we take?
Split in
What's that?
9 blocks.
Right, but I mean, if you wanted
Or
to,
put less percentage.
let me rephrase my question. I didn't rephrase that right. Well, you're right about that actually. But what would we use to identify what is wrong here? Inspect element, right? So inspect element is your best friend. If you don't have it up, you should always have this available. The little magnifying class allows you to just go over these divisions and look at them. On the bottom here, I can actually click on a certain division and see what kind of content, like what its margin is, what its actual height and width is, and everything about it, right? So I can either click on these from the left side here, from the actual elements, and click on each element and see it individually, or by having this clicked, which I already have, I can just kind of hover my mouse over them. So if I look at this division and I click on it perhaps, I can see that this is the box, just like we're seeing here, but there's something to the right of it that's orange, right? Or peach, or whatever you want to call it. What is it? Well, if we look through here, we can see that it's margin, right? And it's taking up the full right side of the division. And that is because I believe it's considered a block element, right? And by the way, this you can kind of edit on the fly and see how it would adjust, just for testing things out. So what if I added styling on this? Just like, what was it you said? What do we add on it? Inline block? Sure. So let's change the display to inline block. And now that we've done it, let's take a look at it again. Check that out. So that got rid of the margin on the right. That's awesome, right? So that is no longer taking up over the space on the right side of it, that element. And this is true for all divisions that you add inline block to them. They become just blocks in line, exactly, compact to their set width and height. So that is going to be used ton. That's something you want to memorize, essentially. But look at the second one. The second one is the same issue. So no matter if this is within width to fit this one, in reality, this second div is taking up the full row. So it will never be able to fit on the top, right? So how do we fix that? Yep. Display inline block. Great, that's set and that's set. But still, they're not fitting next to each other. They should, because inline block will just block them next to each other, like boxes, right? So what are some thoughts?
Is it that little margin?
Yeah, it's actually that 30% and 70% that complete 100% is a little too high. So you decrease them just a little bit. See how that goes back into place? So at 29%, it fell up. It went up. Do you guys see that? So if you have inline block of both elements, essentially, and you set them for like 50% and 50%, and they're not next to each other, they're not floating next to each other, it's likely that the width is like at the amount of pixel, and you have really what the issue is, I believe, is there is white space between this division and this division right there. And that one single space is affecting the width of the two. So the easy fix is just set the width of one of the two by like 1 less %, right? At some point you can get very, very like down technical and fix this, but for now, it would actually. We can try it. Let me just throw some display inline block here and display inline block here. There they are. So if we go to 30% on both and try to get rid of the white space in HTML here between those two elements, yeah, still works. Right? It's kind of ridiculous. It's not like you would do this on every single one, and if you did, you have to still kind of position it so that this is right there, right? But that's a little tedious, and we don't need to worry about that. So just keep it as is, and just reduce the width on one of the two by just like 1% or 0.5% or something, and they're next to each other. So yes.
Why does that white space have anything to do with how it looks on?
Oh, because this one white space, this one little single space between the two divisions is creating space in HTML. And because each of these two divisions is set to exactly, let's say 50% and 50%, that extra space is expanding their full width to be like 100% of the parent division plus one space. So it won't physically fit. Yeah, so let's kind of color these a little bit so we can actually identify them a little bit better. So we have the very top, which is a light gray. So that's the, which one is the very top division? Div.header, we're going to say background color. You can do RGB for red, green, blue, and I don't know, something like that I'm sure will give us, whoa. That was not part of the plan. Okay, so we need to go higher. So I'm just going for a gray color, right? So I'm just going to just follow that pattern. So there's a gray right there for the top one. We need the same color gray from that bar and the bottom bar, and then we need a darker one for my essays, right? So let's see. The header, we defined here to have a background color. We want the nav bar to be the same color. So I'm just going to copy this line of code. There it is. Okay. There's that. And whoops. We have a footer as well. Let's just, yeah, red, green, blue, just color. As opposed to put gray, I just do this so I can kind of modify the color on the fly.
Darker or lighter gray.
Yeah, exactly. So notice how this can get kind of complex. I didn't mean it to be like that, but we'll fix that in just a moment here. Nav, are we calling nav anywhere else? No. Div.nav, background color, same thing. And then div.footer, background color, the same thing.
You already have a div on that right there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, oh yeah, so I already colored it actually. Thank you. So this should be content. Content should be a darker gray. So I'm going to give it another background color, but I'm going to just, I don't know, 110's in this one. There we go. So that's kind of, whoops, what we're looking for, right? That is similar to that, more or less. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it on the outside, right? Pretty close, relatively speaking. So let's just pause here for a second. I have a div container, so I'm going to kind of like space them out so we can see them a little easier in sections. We have the body and we have the header. Cool. And if I need to add, you know, comments, I should, you know, header, tag, whatever. You could just do that, right? That's totally okay and probably recommended to do it as needed. In the body, I have two parts. I have the nav bar, which is on the left, and I have the content, which is on the right of the body. So far, so good? Okay. So let's fix this up a little bit. We have the container. That's great. I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit. And inside the container, I have these divisions that are all being affected. So I'm going to tab them over because these divisions are all within the container. So header is also within the container, stays in line with that. Content is actually inside of the body div, right? And I'm not even using the body div, but if I have div.body here, the content should be tabbed right ahead of that. Does that make sense? And the nav should be actually prior to this one. So I'm just kind of aligning them so that I can kind of identify that in the body I have a nav and a content div, and this is where I'm going to style it. The header is the first thing. I have really nothing inside of the header yet, so it stays as is. The body has the nav and the content inside of it. And then the footer is not going to be the very far end because the footer exists inside of the container, so that's going to be tabbed over one time to stay in line with all of this.
The color. That.
Oops.
So you don't have that.
Yeah, good call. So this can go here. Okay. So it kind of follows a pattern, right? But as we write more HTML and CSS, we'll follow more of a better pattern right now. So that should still look the same, but let's double check, just in case we kind of did anything. Okay, cool. So a couple of things to directly identify is that all these divisions by default will have full margins on this left and right side, on their left and right side, to take up the full width of their parent division. So if I have a division called container, and inside the container I have a division of just anything, that division is full width at all times, until I specify, for example in this case, header to have inline block if I wanted to. I don't want header as inline block, I want more of like inside of a body, I want the nav bar to be inline block so it doesn't take the full width. Same thing with content. So I can give this like 30% and this one 70% width to fit inside of the body. That's the first thing. The second thing to identify is notice how most of these divisions, let's take a look at this. Both of those divisions are inside of body. So I'm going to give a background color of red to the body. And we can kind of see it kind of overflow on the sides there. You guys see that? Because inside of the body div I have two boxes. I have two divisions. This one here though is fallen to the ground essentially, right? It's kind of like down. How do we make it so that both of these at all times stay at the very top of their parent division? Yeah, that's also something you should definitely note or mark or something, or remember. A vertical line along with display inline block kind of have to be remembered. The vertical line will move the divisions so that their alignment essentially vertical is at the top. That's really exactly what it means. But so I think we have to do it on the actual elements themselves. So it's vertical line top. So let's look at the nav. Nav got to the top, and we'll just do the same thing for the other one. Because if we increase the body's width to like 500 pixels, I think even that one will drop. Whoops, not width. The body's height, 500 pixels. Oh no, it stays. But if we, well, it may still not stay. Oh, it does stay. There may be a situation where this division here, if it's not set to vertical align top, will still fall under. So we can deal with that as we get to it. But what I mean to say is essentially you could set both of these divisions to have this vertical align top for both of these. But right now we just needed this one to be so. So let's get rid of that background color. We don't need that anymore, and the height we don't need to worry about that either. So there we are. So that looks kind of like this. So what should we do next? I would say we'll just make all the divisions have that kind of like circular kind of approach to them, which is what? Yeah. So I want the header, the body, the footer, and the content. Header, footer, and nav and content to all have that radius, right? So either you just call on each tag, or you create a style where you call on all the tags together. It's up to you. We're going to do them one by one. We're going to say header. We're going to say border radius 20 pixels and see what happens. No, 50 pixels? What is this? Yeah, about more or less 50 pixels. So if that works for this one, we're going to continue on and just copy this from the header div. The body we don't need, the nav div, the content div, and the footer div. Oops. Oops. So, yep, that's kind of close. What's next? Do you guys see that's big that we can change immediately to make these two look close to each other? Yeah, I agree. I think we can start with margin. Yeah. and just space out the top section from the middle section from the bottom section, right? Just add some spacing between them. Just real quick to catch up real quick on this. If I right-click on this and inspect elements, if you guys pay attention down here, it selected me what I just selected. So I don't know if I right-click and inspect element there. I don't know if I'm actually clicking on the body div or if I'm clicking on the nav div or the content div for whatever reason. Let's say maybe they're stacked on each other. So if you just look down here, I'm actually selecting the body div. So if I look at the body div on the very bottom here, this thing is awesome. This thing is awesome because you can just kind of hover and see if there is margin, border, padding, and the actual width and height of the actual element. In this case, the div class body has no margin, no border, no padding, but the height and width of, or width and height of 970 and 354. We can change them, I think, even on the spot right there. So if I just go here and just double click on margin and add like 10, it adds, you notice how it's highlighted now? It adds to it. So I think here we can kind of just mess with it. Yeah, you can even press the up button and just start like messing with it. All right, I want 30 here. That seems good. I'm gonna go down here and change this to 30. Let's see. That looks, whoops, that looks pretty good. Okay, so 30. So I need to set the I need to set the body tag to have a height. I mean, to have a margin top of 30 and margin bottom of 30, right? And again, I'm just following this pattern. You can follow this pattern on all of the elements. So we want the body tag to have a margin top of 30. Does it say 30? Yeah, 30 pixels, and margin bottom of 30 pixels. The shorthand is margin, and then you give it 4 numbers, and it's clockwise. It starts at the 12, and it's 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So it'd be 30. Whoops. 0, 0. Whoops. 30 is the top, 0 is the right, 30 is the bottom, 0 is the left, right? So you don't have to do this. I'm just letting you know there's a shortcut to do it, right? But being more specific is great too. Margin top, margin bottom, margin left, margin right.
Do you not have to write the X when you do that?
You do not. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Let's find out. Yeah, you don't. I don't think you're supposed to actually. Cool. So there it is. So we have that kind of set there. And really that's it on the large boxes. So that right there is the biggest part of it. Right? That right there, when we grade the test, well, let's see. There's a little bit of a gap here that we need to create. So let's just do that real quick, just to fix that spacing. So what would happen if I add margin on either of the two left or right side of these two units?
They will pull.
Exactly, because it will increase the full width of that. The width between those, because margin is included in the width of the element. So adding margin, you increase the width. One will fall under. So to avoid that, we just make one of the elements smaller. Perhaps this will be 60% wide, and you kind of have to eyeball it a little bit. Maybe 65, right? So this is where you kind of mess with it, 63, 66, whatever you guys want. We'll go 63, and then we'll give the content a margin left of like 20 pixels, and see if that does it. So that's kind of like okay, but I mean we just kind of.
Can you do percentages with margin as well?
That's a great question.
Like if you do minus 7%?
Yeah, let's take a look. Yeah, I guess you can.
What is the 7%?
7% margin of the parent division's width. Yeah, if that confuses you, don't worry about it. Just go by specific pixels, but you can use a parity percentage, and it's referring to the same percentage as the width. So if you say width 63%, margin 7%, they're relevant to each other.
Well, the percent's better too for
Accuracy, yeah, that's true. But just for simplicity, really, if you guys are comfortable with it, use it. That sounds like a great idea. Mostly if the parent division is a set width. But right now, we're going to set pixels. We're going to say this is the width of 65, and this will be 30 pixels. And if this doesn't work, we're going to, oh, that's pretty good actually. But we're going to go here and just add to, not that one, we need to look at the content, so we're going to click on it. We have margin there, that's great. So we're going to change the width there. I'm going to press the up button and just increase it. Whoa, I'm changing the wrong thing. I need to increase this thing. And How accurate do we want to get, right? There we go. 653.50. I think that's percent though, right? I think we set the width of that container to be percent. Yeah, okay, so that was kind of a bad idea, but you get my point, right? We can kind of, oh, there you go. That was luck, but that worked. At this point, whoops, where is it? It's there. I'm going to put these two in the same for a moment. Yeah, at this point, they're pretty close to each other. The only thing we're missing is content. So we'll put the content on there real quick. But my point being is, before you add content, having something like this is like, I think, a big win, right? Because you feel you feel done for one, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm pretty much done with all the hard stuff. I just need to put content inside of it. And also, when you start adding content inside of it, you don't have to worry about that content affecting the other things around that element. So if I'm going to work on the header tag actually can have a set height as opposed to min height, or we can leave it as a min height. But we know that if this thing increases, it won't affect anything down here. Zero effect to them, right? Or if you set a set height, we know that we're affecting only this division and everything within it only. Yeah.
So would you recommend to write the CSS first?
Like this.
And then the HTML?
Well, kind of like this, where they're kind of doing it both together.
Structure.
If you're referring HTML to the content, yes, absolutely.
So
Structure.
HTML last.
Perfect.
Or-
Yeah. Structure first on all of it. Absolutely. Maybe in larger companies it's different because you get a section of things you work on, and so you you perfect that section, and then you bring it together with a bunch of people, and it looks great. But when you're building the entire website, doing this kind of really it's just
Saves so much time.
yeah, saves so much time, easier to see. You feel more confident about it.
What's less cluttered looking too?
Yeah. So a great call. So we can get rid of the outline now. Notice I use the outline the entire time. I hope you guys do the same. Get rid of the outline, and there you are. Maybe the outline kind of threw us off a little bit. Maybe we need to reduce the margins a little bit, but those are just details. So let's just kind of mess around with a little bit. We have 30 minutes. You guys want me to do the content real quick? Okay. So H1, we have loops. What is it? At loops? What is that thing? At loops. Loopses? Oh, loops. Loopses? It's loopses? Is that the idea? It's like a last name or something? Cool. So well, first off, our nav bar is a little too large. Or not nav bar, actually, our header. The header minimum height, maybe you don't need the minimum stuff anymore. If I get rid of the minimum stuff, you'll see a lot of things get really small. Right, so maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we won't get rid of it entirely because that looks all odd. Maybe we'll just make the minimum height to be very small so we can see them, but we don't need to really worry about it. There we are. So how we're going to affect that? Well, we can add margin. We can also add padding. I think padding would do it. Perfect. So this is a class header. So here we are. Inside of my header, I have an H1 tag. Where should I position my CSS for it, and what should it look like?
Underneath the header.
Absolutely, because inside of the header. And how do I call specifically the H1 tag inside of that header without giving it a class or an ID?
Div dot header.
Yeah, because we can say here, look up for the div with the class of header, which is that right there that I have highlighted. And then inside of that, look at either the first or any, right? You can either say the first or any H1 tags. We only going to have one, so no big deal, right? So now here I'm going to put a background color red just to make sure that I'm selecting it. That's one thing a lot of people waste a lot of time on, is they don't even know if they're selecting the right thing. They change CSS, nothing changes, and then 15 minutes later they realize they're not selecting the thing. So I would recommend just throw something crazy on there like background color red. If you see it, you know it's working, great. You move forward. We do the same thing when we code. So you check one step at a time. You never assume things. So here what we're going to do is say padding, let's say 50 pixels just to see what happens. That's awesome. We don't need it that big though. 30 pixels, still probably too big. 20 pixels. It's pretty good. Close enough. we can get detailed, but let's take a look at the elements. The H1 tag is just the blue. Whoops. That's the H1 tag, but we added the padding of 20 all around it, so it increased its parent division to in height, right? So it kind of made it look like it's in the center because that's taking up the full height and width of the parent division, right? And there is a little bit of margin, but that is part of what? I don't know what that's part of. I think that's the elements of vendor. Yeah, I think it's the actual divisions header. Huh. Or perhaps the H1 tag has built-in margins. So we don't have to mess with it because it's working great, but let's just because we want to understand it, let's put margin 0 here and see what happens. Okay, so it was something that's not affecting anything, but it was built-in margin in the H1 tag. Again, you don't have to guess any of this stuff. Just click on the element and then look down here and see what each part of it. Okay, so I know that the body tag, this div, has margin of 30 top and bottom, has no border, no padding, it has a height and width of this. So don't guess it. Just look up, use your tools and identify what's going on. So loops is working there. That's great. We could change the font style and all that stuff, but that's good. Let's do the left side here. So inside of the nav, let's see. Do we want the first one to be part of the list? No. So we're going to have here an H3 tag perhaps that says home, and then an unordered list that will have in it list item times too many articles. And inside of the next, yeah, do we do another list here? And then inside of that, an LIs, I think that'll do it. Stuff. Okay. All right. Let's kind of fix it up a little bit. So what will we do next? I want to get this content. Let's right-click on that tag and see where it's at. That's up there. So I want that content to get closer inside of that element. Any padding? Yeah, we can add padding to what?
To the H3.
We could add padding to the H3. Sure. Let's just see what that would look like. Here's the H3. Here's padding, top and left. Let's do left. Whoa, what happened? Yep, that's moving. All right. And then we can do that for every single one. I think another approach we could try is use padding on the actual division itself. So the content inside of this division is a little more like shrunken in. So if we look at the nav bar, we can add padding. We can add padding on specifically top and padding on specifically the left side. And perhaps before we do that, we'll set a default padding for all around it. You don't have to go this detailed, but maybe we don't want the same padding all around. Maybe we do. Maybe we'll just say simple. Let's just say 20 pixels all around it. Let's keep it simple. Huh, why did that happen?
It's gaining release.
Yeah, I think padding 20 is just ridiculous. Perhaps maybe we need like 5. Padding, maybe 1. What? Okay, let's take a look at this element. Spec element. Let's look at the division. That's the division. So if we add padding, we're adding padding outside of it. Actually, we have no padding. So if we add padding on the top of it, like 10. So is it the width, or what is it exactly that's doing it? Yeah, it's the full width. It's too big, right? Is it? Yeah, so maybe we can reduce their sizes. So maybe this will be like 25%, and this one will be 63%. And then we can add some padding to affect it. So nav padding 10 pixels, maybe 15 pixels,
You
25
find you can do
pixels.
that a lot. Resize some divisions if you add padding and margin after.
Yeah, I guess.
It actually, every time that you add margin or padding to an element, it increases the size of what's called the bounding box. You can see it in the inspect element. There's a little
The largest
graphic representation of this thing. So this is the content inside, or this is the border. The margin comes outside of the border. The padding goes inside of the border, and then whatever the content inside will also increase the thing. There's actually a rule that you can use called box sizing, which will change the behavior of that. If you give it a box sizing bounding box, then it'll, instead of adding to it, it will just
Shrink
apply
inside
those
of it.
properties to it. But that's a newer thing that's not supported in older browsers.
Okay, let's not worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With loops, the header, can you put padding on the actual heading? And I didn't understand that, but if you would put the padding on the actual header itself, then it would squash loops down. Does that make sense? I'm asking.
Yeah, if we put the padding on the actual division as opposed to the H1 tag.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it looked like you put it on the H1.
Yes.
Okay, how did that work?
Because the H1, I think this is pushing out from the H1 tag. Yeah, because padding is extending out of the H1 tag. So the H1 tag, if I added a border to the H1 tag, it would go to the very far edges of that division.
The H1 tag is also a container,
Division.
and then the things inside of it is just the content inside of it could be whatever.
Got it. Okay.
Each one is sort of like
Yeah.
a div is just a generic container.
Yeah.
All these other kinds of things are usually containers.
So you guys see that H1 tag, how it's far away from my text? Do you guys see why perhaps it is? Yeah, margin. So if I get this margin to become 0, what happens? Well, apparently not much. Let's look at this one then. Inspect element above it, not that. Let's look at the UL. The UL has a margin up top as well. So we change the margin top of the unordered list. They go right inside of each other. So really, if we just identify each element and what CSS styling they have in it, we can manipulate them, right? Is that the best approach? I don't see why not, right? Does this sound good? I think it sounds good. So let's see, H1 tag, we want to change the margin. Oh, that's for the, excuse me, that's for a different thing. Whoops. So inside of the body, inside of the nav, we have an H3 tag. So here we're going to say div.nav and the H3 tag inside of it. We want to set the margin bottom to 0 pixels. And I also want the div.nav, the first unordered list, right? I want its margin top to be like 5 pixels, something really, really small. So there we go. Maybe there's too much margin on top. Anyways, we can mess around with that. There's a little too much also radius. We can reduce that as well and bring it up a little bit. What else do we want to do? That's an unordered list instead of an LI. So there should be another LI. Am I doing this right? Are we supposed to put an UL inside of a UL? I think this is to be an LI.
What you do is you put it inside of the list item.
Yeah.
You close out the list item after.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do it, but that'll put another dot next to it if you want it.
And then we have to change the styling. Right.
Well, you could have it just inside of the articles list item and then close it out afterwards. See?
Oh, inside of that one?
Yeah,
Is that hacky or no?
I think that's the.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think that's kind of the expected.
Okay,
behavior, right?
cool, interesting.
I'm not sure.
No, that works. That works
I
really
mean,
well.
it looks right.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is.
Well said, sir.
Bruce,
Other
but-
stuff. Other stuff. Cool. And then for each one of these, how did you guys change the? Oh, that's interesting. Hey, look at that. How did you guys change these things? Yeah, it's styling type, right? Decoration, is it?
I believe it's already doing the right
Gosh,
kind of thing.
It looks like it's already doing it.
Yeah, that's the default behavior of a nested. unordered
Oh, it
list,
is.
right?
Oh, thanks.
Oh, then I know.
Yeah, but if we Google it, we can find all of the LI style
Yeah, you can change it to diamonds or.
bullets.
Yeah, I changed mine to stuff on list.
CSS styling lists. Is this it? No, there's one where it gives you like a list of them. Maybe it was a different one. List type property.
Yeah, there's square.
Yeah, there they are.
Up.
Decimal, square. Are these it, right?
Style type.
There's list style.
You
type.
see?
Oh yeah.
I think these are it. Yeah. Hey, look. Looks like
Wow.
different letters.
You got all kinds.
So we can look at all these
Topic
circle.
See.
Oh, I see. You do these two. Square. Yeah. So essentially, point being is you don't have to guess this stuff. They just look them up.
Yeah.
And,
That also is the right way to do the nested lists. I looked it up once.
what is that? That's cool. That's what I'm going to use on my next presentation. Yeah. So none. Mark is shown as none. Cool.
There's also, you can use a custom image to do that as well.
Wait, is this? This is not ours. Nor is that. There's a product. Oh, that's right. Huh. Okay, so pretty close. What other part do you guys want to see? Any other part of it, or is this like most look good? I'm gonna stop it here.